Welcome to Wireless Applications and our dirt simple telecom tools. In this how-to video we are going to show you an overview of SiteSync Pro's demographic tools. Carriers and tower companies are the target audience. However, they are useful tools in a variety of operations. Since we have multiple components in SiteSync around the subject, we felt it best to combine each here in one video with the descriptions and intent of each. The core reason for obtaining traffic for telecom goes way back to the early 90s when the only way to get new sites proposed and pushed through the budgets was to prove out the traffic counts and penetration levels of a POP calculation. We would run radio frequency propagation from the proposed location and hideout to a -102 dBm signal level, then capture all the POP counts and calculate a 2% penetration rate. Fast forward to today and still we look at these data sets. Best use cases being for tower companies' colocation businesses. Now the concern is more about competition. For example, other tower company towers being close by. And then that of spectrum ownership for the potential carriers they may get for colocation. We will look at the main components here of structure search, demographics, prospectus, spectrum and then down to our eCoverage. There are three main methods for generating data and are mostly laid out the same in each of the components, which is what we call the side menus here. Once in a component, the first and easiest is to drop a pin. This allows users to click and drop an orange icon that can be dragged and used for a location of a site, then query the outputs. The second is portfolios. Users can use an existing portfolio, then pull down its site list, and choose a single site location. The third is from within the map. Simply doing a right-click will pull up a short menu from those coordinates for running various queries. In this session, we will quickly run through those methods. Starting in structures, we will quickly go to Tumwater, Washington, going up to our jump to box and start typing in Tumwater. Arrow down and click enter, that will zoom us to that area. We are going to drop a pin, and then adjust the radius out to 5 miles. Run search. We now have results of existing structures, which are labeled with our theme setting set to structure heights. Let's go ahead and move over to the Google Maps, and then click on Terrain button. This is so we can see where the mountains are. Panning up a little bit, we see a location that could see down into the valley. Let's go ahead and right-click on this site. This brings up our map menu options for various components. We are going to focus on search demographics here. This opens up the demographics page from the components menus, and drops in a 1 mile default radius and then performs the task. If we move back over to WAC Maps, this allows us to see one additional layer, which is the business locations. As we scroll down below, you will see that WAC has put together a collection of U.S. Census block groups from year 2000, 2010, and 2020 with a breakdown of the population densities, then male, female, down to all the children and adults. Below that we go into the FCC boundaries of the BTAs and MTAs. And last has the business counts, also tied to the 1 mile default. Looking in the map again, the shading provides all the population densities breakdowns. These are broken up into what the most common ones were throughout the years of running CapEx budgets and build-outs. If we want an output of this entire process, we go up to the top of the page and click on the PDF maker. This will load a PDF. If we download that, we can see the results in a nice clean PDF. Let's close this feature set and move on to the next demographic section. Next we go into Prospectus component directly. This is a unique blend of data mostly used for tower companies in their evaluations for lease-up potentials, whether it's a new or existing site for purchase. We are going to go into the Portfolio tab up on the top and then select the first menu, which pulls all of our existing portfolios. We are going to type in PDX, so that we can find the text that's in with our portfolio, and then pull down the second menu, which is the lists of all sites that are inside of that particular portfolio. The first one here is our demo one that we're doing today. We hit the select button on the bottom, and then hit search. Similar to the demographics component, there are census block groups boundary areas which are shaded as population density. Then we have existing structures shown as the larger red dots, and then the smallest dots are the business locations. WAC breaks this prospectus down into search rings, the sizes of which are key for tower companies we have worked with throughout the years. These are 0.5, 1, and 2 miles are mostly for the urban areas. And then 1, 2, and 5 mile are the rural areas. The default is set for the most common sizes. As we go down below the map, we see a new series of information. First is the coordinates in the GIS information. And then we break down the population densities into those same census block groups of 2000, 2010, and 2020. And then the population as well. The search radius breakouts below here are matching to the 0.5, 1, and 2 miles that are defaulted up above. Each are colored for that. And then the dataset below that section is for traffic counts. This dataset comes from 2018 and finds the closest unique roads from the center point out. On the very bottom, we have the business counts from the 2004, 2008, and 2018 datasets from when WAC geocoded around 7 million records each. In the tower analysis area for the various radius, we have the tower counts for how many records we find, and then in gray coloring, the last year and how many were found, for seeing if there's new activity or not. And then, once again, going up to the top, if we're looking to output this data, we can export as Excel or can simply hit the PDF icon. We will generate that in the PDF format. This output is more robust from demographics, and shows all the various radius sizes and what the competition is looking like around your area. Let's close this and we will go on to our next component. We will now click into the spectrum component. We will open that up into a new tab. Once again, we will use that portfolio tab and start typing in our PDX text to find our portfolio name and select that. On the site pull down we have to unselect all, then we will just select our top demo record. Hit select on the bottom and then search. The map itself will just zoom to that location, no real mapping data. What we want to do is scroll down and see the verbose data of spectrum ownership. The way this works is that we are drilling down through multiple FCC boundaries and checking to see who owns each radio service type, the band, and at what depth their megahertz goes to, whether it's owned or leased. This top section is focused on the most common bands that carriers are using. The first column is the key to FCC authorization from their many auctions. This is called the radio service code, also known as RSC. Then inside the type code is the breakdown of the deployment channel plans laid out from the FCC. For instance, you may already have known from the past A and B bands for cellular, which has radio service code of CL. Those are from the early 80s and they are still very much in play today. And then if you have heard of the C-band term, or been one of the lucky ones locked in this controversy, which was the FCC auctioning if off versus the FAA not wanting it deployed, this band is down towards the bottom known as PM. All of these are known as the C-band. There are many different channel plans of this spectrum. Many carriers that bought these were held up for years, unable to deploy it, because the FAA was fearful that it might interfere with airplane altimeters. Our data of bandwidth is then listed below in a summary showing a graph of total megahertz for each carrier. Underneath that are all the radio service codes and the descriptions from FCC. But that's not all you get. Underneath that section is what is known as the UU band. It too shows all the carrier depth and ownerships. The UU band is mostly all the upper gigahertz bands that were auctioned off. Some may know this as a 28 gig or a 37 or 38 gig play. These are all the ownerships of those bands that were auctioned off. As we scroll down this list, we will also see the totals of just how much depth of bandwidth some of these carriers have by looking in this little graph that summarizes it. Some of these have over 1,000. What this does for colocation is if a carrier has a ton of bands and bandwidth, they can deploy sites further away from each other. If they don't have much spectrum, then the closer together they must build sites in order to not run out of capacity. As we continue to scroll down, SiteSync then shows a real-time poll of what was deployed in the broadband plan. This was where government gave out billions in award cash for companies willing to deploy to individual household addresses. Although satellite and cable companies were the obvious choice for rural areas, others came to the game, as there was millions of dollars to be had. This data shows who claims having equipment at the location and at what data rates they service. And then we have a link at the top here that takes you straight to the broadband mapping that shows that particular address and who is deployed there. We'll scroll back up. This last section is a unique feature that we have for coverage prediction modeling called eCoverage. Let's click on that component, and once again, we will go into the Portfolio tab and select the PDX1 and the first site. This preloads its coordinates, site name and heights. What we want to do here is change the threshold settings out to the common used 5. And let's bump up the wattage up to, let's say, 2300 watts and propagate. Running these takes around 15 seconds. We could have also changed the different types of frequencies here, or the correction factor, or even the antenna types, but all we are worried about here is the demographic feature that is also part of it. We will zoom to this location. And let's go into Google so that we can get the terrain on here. What we want to do here in order to see the demographics part is click on the WAC-E tool and then single click once on the location. This output is called an RF contour and uses the same principles as what is used for the regulatory processing of cellular for build-outs from the mid-80s and even to this day. The difference from those requirements for FCC filings is that they used 8 radials, which would generate more of a circle and named a carry contour, and this claimed their territory. Here, we generate over 30 radial points so that we can get a more defined RF coverage of that location. This principle was known as extended studies filings. Notice that in this pop-up, down at the bottom, we now have a contour calculation displayed. This pulls a proportional overlap from the census demographics that the contour contains, and calculates the data. You can move the icon, and it will quickly recalculate, running the propagation modeling at each location from that contour. This gives the per square miles, the density, and the pop count. It's good to also know that there is a clear map link at the top. This is to clear off all the propagation layers afterwards. The feature allows you to run a propagation, then could go into the structure search component and it stays there until you clear it. There is one more section of SiteSync that works exclusively for tower companies for evaluating buy-sell opportunities for sites. We call this location analysis. It used to be called SSPro, and can generate up to 5 reports automatically with one button click. This gives you the census, WAC demographic ratings, business location depth, spectrum ownership, competitive site records, and even a radio frequency propagation output. These are all part of our add-in that you can purchase separately into your SiteSync subscription. The reports are also part of our filing services. If you file FAAs with us, then these reports come as part of that deluxe filing package. Thank you for watching.